sea was angry that day, my friends. Like an old man trying to return soup back in a deli. One of the best monologues, one of the best scenes, and definitely one of the biggest laughs in the series was this unbelievable last-minute rewrite, no rehearsal take that ended this episode. One of the best endings, definitely making this another fantastic episode, and apparently this episode is said to be Jerry's favorite in the series. And if that's the case, I don't blame him. This was another outstanding episode, another episode to me that when you say Seinfeld, one of the first things you think of because of this episode. So we're going to talk about the Marine Biologist episode. This episode consists of like a couple little different stories, some very epitome of like a small little detail you wouldn't even think of comes back to being a big moment at the end of the series. So the episode starts with Jerry and Elaine at Jerry's apartment. Elaine's on the phone. At the same time, Jerry is bragging about his favorite shirt he likes to call Golden Boy. Of course, Elaine's like too distracted to talk because she's on the phone, I think, with Mr. Lippman. Golden Boy though is apparently he's saying how Golden Boy is getting old and like getting frailed up, and saying how like not too many more washes and Golden Boy will be toast basically. But then Elaine starts getting excited because she's told that Yuri Testikov, a famous Russian writer, is coming to the United States and wants to get his book published with Pendant Publishing, and Elaine is going to be the editor for his book, which makes Elaine very excited because that's a very, very big opportunity for her. And then they start talking about books, and Jerry starts talking about the book War and Peace. And apparently how it was originally, he made a joke because apparently he heard that it was originally supposed to be called War, What Is It Good For? Whoever the writer was, I can't remember what his name was. Let me check that for a second. Let me see here. War and Peace author Leo Tolstoy. Yes, that's who it was. Yes, I knew it was the T. But so, Elaine, obviously, wanting to make a good impression on Testikov, would go on to tell him that story, which we'll get to that in a second. Of course, as they're talking, George walks in and goes, "You can't handle the truth," trying to do his best Jack Nicholson impression. He brings in his mail, but he claims he brought his mail with him because apparently his mom has a habit of going through his mail. And he literally just reads it for no reason because she was just curious, which pisses off George. So in his mail was an alumni section of from Queens College, for which course where Jerry and George went to. Of course, there's a blurb in there about Jerry, about a successful comedy career. They do mention that he wrote a TV pilot, Jerry, that wasn't picked up. But obviously there was nothing in there about George, which Elaine asks, why isn't there nothing there about George? And then Jerry goes, he can't handle the truth. So she goes to leave, and she walks into the hall, and Kramer was coming back with some golf clubs, and the bag accidentally bumps Elaine on the shoulder. We'll talk about an outtake that happened, actually, on that a little later. But then, in the hallway, Kramer gives Elaine this electronic organizer, which he doesn't want it, so Elaine takes it. She thinks it'll become very useful to her. Then again, it would all come back to bite her later. But then, as that's going on, Jerry and George are still in the apartment talking, and George starts talking about some science TV show he was watching, and about whales. And he starts talking about these marine biologists. Then Kramer walks in. He's like, "Hey, who wants to have some fun? You really want to have fun, or more, do you really want to have fun?" So he mentions how he got 600 Titleists from the driving range, and he says, why don't we go up to one of the beaches, find a good spot, bring out our drivers, and hit him into the ocean. We'll whack them, they'll be flying up in the air, hold there for a moment, and then, And then Jerry and George were just like, let's get something to eat, and they basically just leave Kramer there, and Kramer starts like practicing his golf swing for the heck of it. So then Jerry wanted to stop at the bank before meeting George at the coffee shop. So he's at the bank, and there's a woman standing right there, and he's just like, making his little jokes about little bank jokes, like basically going into play-by-play. And as he walks away, the woman recognizes him, and it's Diane DeCon from Queens College, who he went to college with. So they were just talking. She said how she watches his shows. She's seen about him in the alumni session. He seems to be doing pretty good. And she says, "Whatever happened to your friend George, by the way?" And she goes, He says, "I never see anything about him in there. He seemed to always be a big goof off." To which Jerry, of course, didn't want to make his friend look bad, so he starts up some things saying he thinks of George talking about that science show and the whales and the marine biologists, and he tells her that George is actually a successful marine biologist. Something that he's studying, trying to lower whales' cholesterol or something like that, and she seems very impressed. So Jerry goes to meet George at the coffee shop, and he tells George this, and basically says how that she's going to be giving him a call, and he can't believe it. But then Jerry spills it to him that the reason why she's calling is because that she's under the impression that George is a marine biologist. And then George was just like, "But I'm not a marine biologist." And then of course she ends up calling him, and they have a great conversation. But then George was so upset, like, "Why did you put me in this position? It's just very awkward." He goes, "Why can't you tell her I wanted to be an architect or something like that?" Which, once again, always comes back to George, which it's been a while, actually. But we keep coming back to George and the idea of him becoming an architect. Or working for Vandelay Industries and Art Vandelay, and all those jokes is coming back to him. But, of course, now he's trying to, be able to keep this relationship going, even because he's into her. But, obviously, he has to eventually come to the truth that I'm not a marine biologist. Kramer, though, comes in, and he just, in the scene before, you see Kramer out on the beach trying to hit golf clubs, and he's swinging and missing. He comes in, slams him down on the ground, says, "Take them. I stink!" He goes, I can't hit a single one. I kept thinking ground. I only hit one golf ball, and it went flying out into the ocean. And other than that was it. That one golf ball will come back to haunt though later on in the show, but and then he starts freaking out because he has sand all over him, and it's getting all over the place. And then, Jerry told him to quit getting on the floor and whatnot, but for days, Kramer just kept fighting on trying to get, the sand off of him. Meanwhile, Elaine is with Mr. Lippman and Testikoff in a limousine picking him up from the airport, taking him to his hotel room. They're making conversation there, and Elaine wants to leave a good impression on the author, who seems like a very, serious, down-to-business guy. She tells the story about what Jerry told her about how Tosley, the author of War and Peace, originally wanted to call it War, What Is It Good For? And which Lippman's just like, "No, Elaine. And of course, Testikoff doesn't seem to impress. But then her electronic organizer starts beeping. She can't figure out how to get it off, and obviously it shows that, nagging little noises bother the crap out of Testikoff. So he takes the organizer, throws it out the window. And then Jerry then gets a phone call from a random woman saying that she got hit in the head with an organizer, and the only person's name she found on it was his and his number, so she called him. So Jerry meets her at the coffee shop, and basically tells, basically she doesn't want to get the organizer back until, she wants someone to pay for her hospital bills for her injury from getting hit by the organizer. Her name was Claire, by the way. So Jerry basically needs to, have get Elaine to pay for, the bills. Well, Elaine, first off, goes to see Kramer because she's upset about the organizer, and obviously she's upset that she didn't leave a good impression on Testikoff. But Kramer, of course, is still dealing with the sand and everything. Jerry comes up and sees Elaine in the hallway, and basically there's basically they're acting like, they both know what each other's upset about. Well, Elaine was upset that, Jerry told her that story about war wasn't good for, and the fact she told Testikov and he was not impressed. And then Jerry says that he found her organizer, which Elaine said, "Oh, great, can I have it?" He's like, "No." She goes, "The lady's not giving it back until she gets the money for a hospital bill." She goes, "Well, I was the one who threw it out the window. It was Testikov. He should be paying for it." And then Jerry goes, "How much money is Testikov making off this book?" And Elaine goes, $1 million. And Jerry's like, "Well, that's a start." So basically, they're coming up with a plan to go to Testikov's hotel room and record him, secretly tape record him, saying that he threw the organizer out the window. So Claire, the lady who got hit in the head with the organizer, and it still wouldn't stop. The organizer still would not stop beeping. They couldn't figure out how to get it to stop beeping. Lippman told Elaine in the car, just press the button on top. They went with him because that way she can get the money and get the organizer, and that'll be it. Well, they go upstairs to talk to Testikov. First off, Claire was downstairs in the lobby smoking. They told her to stay outside if she wanted to smoke. Well, they're trying to talk to Testikov just when they're about to get to the conversation about the organizer. The tape starts making a weird noise in Elaine's purse, which of course annoys Testikov. He pulls the tape out of the purse. He goes, "I can't stand that noise!" He chucks it out the window, and sure enough, what happens to it? Because she got kicked outside, it lands on Claire. So I'm pretty sure that's another issue there that they have that we never got addressed. George, meanwhile, was walking on the beach, talking more to Diane about, whales and marine biology and all this, because he's a successful marine biologist. All of a sudden, they see a group of people standing up around the beach. And like, what's going on? They go over there, and someone says, "There's a beach whale, she's dying, can't breathe too well." And you hear someone who apparently was voiced by Larry David going, "Is there anybody here who's a marine biologist?" And then George turns around, he's like, because he's not a marine biologist, but obviously Diane's gonna be like, he's the marine biologist, but George can't just spill it there because it would be horrible looking. So then everybody's like telling him to save him. Then finally it's silent, and Diane goes, "Save the whale, George, for me." So George just walks through the crowd. He just tosses his hat off to the side and just starts marching into there like a hero. And then the scene cuts back to the coffee shop. And believe it or not, hang on here. The Marine Biologist script. I am going to literally pull up this script and read this entire dialogue. Where is it? Because this is seriously one of the best scenes in this episode. George said, "So I started to walk into the water. I won't lie to you, boys. I was terrified. But I pressed on. As I made my way past the breakers, a strange calm came over me. I don't know if it was the divine intervention or the kingship of all living things, but I tell you, Jerry, at that moment, I was a marine biologist." This is when Elaine enters and says that she was, how it was in the paper and everything. And then, Kramer's they're saying, "Come on, finish the story," whatnot. And George says the famous line of, "The sea was angry that day, my friends, like an old man trying to return soup at a deli. I got about 50 feet out in there, and suddenly, the great beast appeared before me. I tell you, he was 10 stories high if he was a foot. As I sensed my presence to give out a big bellow, I said, 'Easy, big fella!' And then, as I was watching him struggling, I realized that something was obstructing his breathing. From where I was standing, I could see him directly into the eye of the great fish," which Jerry interrupts him and says, "Mammal," and then George goes, "Whatever," because that's what Jerry credited him earlier back in the opening scene when he was talking about that science show he watches. So then George continues and says, "Well then, from out of nowhere, a huge tidal wave lifted me, tossed me like a cork, and I found myself right on top of him, face to face with the blowhole. I could barely see what from all the waves crashing down on top of me, but I knew something was there. So I reached my hand in, felt around, and pulled out the obstruction. To then, where George, like, it's all dramatic pauses, then his face gets, like, super serious, and he glares directly at Kramer and goes... And sure enough, it was a golf ball. It was a golf ball, and Kramer asks, and after like a long laugh from the audience, as everybody says, probably either this laugh or the laugh whenever Kramer came in and slammed the money down in a contest and went, "I'm out," was probably the longest laugh in the entire series. And Kramer everybody's just like shocked, and Kramer was like, with no expression on his face, goes, "Well, was that a Titleist?" And George was like, and then all Kramer could say was, "A hole in one." Because sure enough, remember what I said earlier, when Kramer was on the beach hitting golf balls and he was making contact with none except for one that went way out there? Well, that one he made contact with landed inside that beach whale. And that was a last-minute rewrite. That was not supposed to be how the show ended. I mean, I don't know what the original script was, but Larry David thought that something was missing, so they just put in this huge page-long monologue that literally was the night before the shoot of the last scene, that Jason Alexander literally had to memorize on the spot, no rehearsal. They claimed there was only one take of it, but as pointed out on IMDb, apparently there is like a jump, like a little bit of a goof where in one shot Elaine's hand's on her face, then another shot where her hand isn't on her face, because there was a shot where it looked like she was starting to laugh whenever George said "easy, big fella," but then following that, her hand was back on her face. So people are saying there may have been a second take that we weren't made aware of. But of course, after the scene was saying how the crowd went wild, and then George was like, everybody was all over him like it was Rocky 1, and how Diane came over, was in tears, hugged him and kissed him. He felt like a big hero. But it was that moment right there. George told her that he was not a marine biologist, and she said, "Go to hell," and he took a bus home. Of course, a big heroic story ends with, "Oh yeah, I lost the girl in the process, because, I lied." So then, of course, they were getting ready to leave, and Elaine's realized that Jerry's had an odd, they're in a bad mood. He goes, "No, I just got my laundry back," and said that Golden Boy didn't make it. The same shirt he was talking about that was frailing up at the beginning of the episode. And then Elaine goes, "I'm sorry." So Jerry's now moved on to Golden Boy's son, Baby Blue. And then, of course, George starts freaking out and saying, "What's wrong with you?" And George goes, "Sand, it's everywhere." So just like Kramer was dealing with the sand, George was dealing with the sand now. So, what an ending. Again, like Jerry said, it's up there with some of the best endings. Like, again, with that and, Terry Hatcher's, they're real and they're spectacular. Or the Elaine saying the fact that she's going to go home and have some new panties that her mother they're all laid out for her. One of the best. This may be, in fact, the best ending in the entire series. Now, I come on, like this, especially the performance by Jason Alexander with the last minute monologue, and pretty much no rehearsal and just the laugh it got. It was gold. It was golder than Golden Boy. And literally, like, just that one little detail of that one ball that Kramer makes contact with happens to land square in a whale's blowhole and blows up George's whole relationship with Diane DeCon. Oh, what an episode. Really, besides mentioning, the whole story about, the whale, the monologue being added in there, there was an outtake, actually, where in the scene wherever Elaine sees Kramer in a hallway and Kramer bumps her on the shoulder with his golf clubs, apparently there was an outtake where Michael Richards accidentally smacked Elaine right in the eye with the golf clubs, gave her like a little bit of like a shiner. And apparently before that take, Julia Louis-Dreyfus was like, are you sure you're going to be okay with this? He goes, "Don't worry, I never hurt anyone in my life." And he just, whack, she gets hit right in the face with the golf club set right in the eye. And what sucked also was Dreyfus at the time was actually battling an 102-degree fever also in that episode, so that just didn't help at all whatsoever. There's one other thing I was going to share besides the monologue, that outtake. That's pretty much all from that. But the other thing to really talk about was, originally they were going to actually put an actual whale in the ocean. The first idea they had was they were going to Castle Rock was going to call up Warner Brothers and ask them if they could rent the whale they used in the movie Free Willy, which was a good movie. I haven't seen that in a while, but that was a good movie. Well, there was a little bit of a miscommunication. They only wanted the mechanical whale, but they thought that they wanted the actual whale, so they were denied. So originally they did make a whale with CGI effects, and it came out good. Larry David liked it, but he thought, you know what? I don't think we need a whale. I think we just need to hear George, just tell the story. Even though, of course, eventually in one of the other discs, there was like a cartoon imitation of, I guess, the sign imitations that's on a couple of the discs, and one of them was like a cartoon version of George doing the monologue and showing like George, saving the whale's life and whatnot. But yeah, there was supposed to be a real whale first, but then it didn't make it into the episode yet. So all that CGI stuff was a waste of time. But yep, that's the Marine Biologist episode. Again, excellent episode, one of the best endings. Love that monologue, I'm sure everybody else does. I think the next one is the dinner party, where everybody gets a little, everybody goes through a lot of chaos just trying to get to a dinner party between wine, jackets, black and white cookies, no heat in cars, all the dumb luck stuff that happens in the dinner party episode, which is another episode that I really enjoy. We'll talk about that one next. So guys, what were your thoughts on the Marine Biologist episode? Do you think that ending monologue with George is one of the best endings in the series? Do you think the moment where George reveals the golf ball has the best laugh in the series, or is it Kramer going, I'm out, back in the contest, or is it something else? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below, and be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to my channel, and follow me on Twitter at DemandAirBoy93. Until then guys, I'm catching out. I will see you all later. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out everybody.